Welcome to the Backstage Creative, the podcast that focuses on the people who work behind the scenes of theater. My name is Krista Copper. On today's episode, I am sharing a conversation that I had with Germán Martinez. Germán works in New York City as a sound designer and audio engineer, and we had a great conversation, and I'm excited to share it with you. For the show, I try to interview people in batches, and so I'll take like 2 weeks and just interview like crazy, and then take a few weeks off from interviewing, and then reach out to a whole bunch of people at once again. And what I found through that is that not everyone I reach out to gets back to me, which is fine. People are busy or don't want to be interviewed, which is fine. I get that. So I usually reach out to a lot of people, realizing that not everyone who I reach out to will get back to me. However, on this last batch of people I reached out to, pretty much everyone got back to me. And so I've been this crazy interviewer machine, having so many wonderful conversations. And I can't wait to share them with the world and with you, the listener. So yeah, make sure that you've subscribed to the Backstage Creative so that you don't miss these great conversations. Yeah, I'm just really excited about this batch of interviews I have coming out soon. So make sure that you subscribe. I know most podcasters ask this of their audience, and I am no different, but I would love if you would leave a rating or a review. It helps me, like it gives me feedback on the show, and it also helps the community. It helps other people who are shopping for podcasts to listen to find it. So while you're at it, leave a rating or review, not only for the Backstage Creative, but also the other podcasts that you listen to, because it's something that benefits the audience and the creators. Enough about that. Let's get to my conversation with Germán Martinez. What have you been up to this past year and a half in the pandemic? Have you been able to work in anything, like be a part of any shows, or have you just been kind of hanging out?
Yeah, it's really difficult. It's been really difficult since I want to say what March is when we had the big shutdown in New York City. At that time, I was doing three shows. I was running one show and I was designing two, and it was really hard to have everything shut down. I mean, that on top of it, from being my livelihood, it's where all of my time and effort was being put into, and for that to be suddenly taken away, it really made me question my worth as a person. It made me think about who I am and where I exist outside of work, and made me really reflect on that. Um, so I want to say the first 6 months afterwards was tough. I had to. I mean, unemployment is wonderful. It helps me pay somewhat of my bills, but I had to get like survival jobs essentially. And there came quite a few. I was doing insurance. I was a host. I was working at a doctor's office. I did anything to have to pay the bills. And then little by little, shows were coming in, and I come to learn what the great world of virtual theater is. It's been a big blessing to have to like learn how to do it virtually and what works, what doesn't work. And a lot of it has been trial and error. And I think now I've gotten to the juncture where I think I know what the formula is, and I've gotten really good at it. In order to, I know what works in underscore worlds. We can't have rain happening at the same time a dialogue is happening. If we are trying to go for soundscape building, we have to add that in post if post is an option. Um, Troubleshooting is a big thing with virtual theater, especially with everybody working with different devices. But that is a long way of saying yes. I've been very fortunate at doing some work. I've been doing a lot of workshops, which is really nice. I've been doing a lot of like Latino workshops, which are I've done with MCC with a group of Puerto Rican artists. It was called Gargola, and that was a lot of fun. I got to make what a gargoyle would sound like, and that is always the fun in creating the impossible. I worked with the Long Wharf Theater, and I've been doing like the college circuits in New York. So I've had the pleasure of working with Brooklyn College, which is phenomenal. I really appreciate that they are all dedicated to the storytelling aspect, and really focusing all the efforts and technical and acting, of course, on let's tell the story and let's vessel this message. Really appreciative working on a new work with Estefania Fadul called Derecho for their first project. And then just recently, I was invited back to do a project called Gunplay with Benny Sato Ambush. And it has been a beautiful time each time. I think Berkeley College takes care of their designers. I value. I mean, me coming as an outsider, I think what they focus on with their students and trying to make sure that their impact of doing a virtual is still inherently rooted in theater methods. We're all just adapting it to like the small screen of what the computer is on Zoom Theater. And then I've also worked at NYU, which that was the first time that I was in person doing pandemic theater. So that's all to say. I've been very fortunate to be doing a lot of these readings. Recently, I've been taking part of the second stage reading series. So what they do is they have been developing new work with young artists, young playwrights, and they give them opportunity to work with the established director. They give them some notable casts, and they give them a week of their work to do. And so it's been me and a video designer and a video editor, and then and a stage manager. And we've been all. It's really kind of guerrilla theater where we like go 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 go. We like filmed this all in a matter of hours. We rehearsed for a week and we record this over 5 hours, and then we edit for another week, and then we stream. So I've been doing three of those, and so currently at second stage we'll be streaming Dream House by Eliana Pipes, directed by Sammy Canolds. We had just wrapped up our last of the series on Saturday, so that has been a lot of fun doing those and having personally, I'm motivated by having the conversations of why now, why do we have to see this, what kind of cathartic experience do we want for an audience member to have, what is the takeaway of this message, and how can I, being a sound artist, being using sound as my medium, help tell this message. So it's been really beautiful in that aspect. I think another project that I was also working with Waterwell, a devised theater for high school students. Back with one of my favorite playwrights, Ajalee Osborne, they wrote a play about Mayan culture, and it was just a ride of a good time. It was queer. It was a social commentary about the pandemic. It talked about the message between relationship of one's culture and where they see themselves in. And I love asking those big questions in theater. That's my favorite part. And so it was a just a ride of a good time to be part of a really of a group that all cared so much to tell the story. Aside from caring to tell the story, we cared about each other in the room and making sure that we were okay, showing up honestly and holistically. It was a really beautiful experience. I wish more of that, more care in each of the processes.
Yeah, that can be rare.
I mean, yeah, I find that a lot of people, some companies want to get the job done. I mean, what is it? The triangle of either do it quick, fast, and cheap. You got to do one of those. I like to take my time and again ask those questions. Why are we doing this? And come from a really prepared dramaturgical approach. Rather, I want to take time and give it the appropriate care and detail for each of the projects that I work on.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
think that I want to say that I've been rather busy in a very fortunate way to be doing virtual theater. What I hope continues out of this pandemic is that rather my fear is I hope that of the companies that I work with that are more reputable, I hope that it's not virtue signaling. I'm very fortunate that I have been working, and as a young queer Latinx artist, I've been making a name for myself. I've been working towards vesseling messages of the show and really talking about the larger questions of why are we doing theater? What does this offer to a larger audience? I hope that it's not just for the sake of virtue signaling and saying, "Hey, look, we did like a Latino show," or "Look, we did a show with Black people. This is what it is."
Yeah.
I really hope it's not just that. Once we're in person, we continue that energy, and that I keep continue to be invited to these places as a respected contributing artist. So I don't want to put that energy out there. It's something I'm just very aware of as I walk into each room.
Yeah, I as a female bass player, I am also very aware of that when I walk into a rehearsal room. Like, all right, how many other women are there? And am I just here to check the box of diversity? Like, oh, we got one woman, we're good.
I mean that's exactly what it is. I mean, it asks the question of are quotas good or not?
Mhm.
And on one hand, I don't want to be just a box. There's so much more that I offer in terms of my talent. On the other hand, yes, I want to see more people like myself. I mean, my personal mission statement where I come from always stems from a place of I want to support, uplift stories that are BIPOC centered. Anything that is first generation stories. I mean, again, these are or anything that is a queer narrative. I want to see more of that because that's who I am, and I find those are the most fruitful experiences, really, where people want to vessel the message and want to say this needs to be shown to the world. When I was in El Salvador, I went to go see. So they have movies. We can go to the theater, which is really strange, and everybody's really precautious about wearing their mask. Everybody wears their mask. We went to go see a movie called La Cachada, and La Cachada has been entered in a few festivals. And what it is I hope I'm not getting this wrong, but it's initially El Salvador did a program to help what we would call in Spanish las mujeres del mercado, which means the women of the market are who sell toiletries, who sell food, who sell anything to make a living. There was a program put in place to help those women because they all had children, and what would happen to those children when they're out selling in the market for hours on end. And so out of that program came another program to provide therapy for them through theater. And what La Cachada is that is then filming this process of their therapy and creating a show out of it. And I found that to be incredibly impactful, and it reminded me myself of that's the theater that I grew up doing. That's the theater that I find that's most valuable. That's the theater that matters to people, of an honest story being told, of from not someone from just from an underrepresented community, but to see something that we've never seen before, and experience a narrative that we don't know of. And let me tell you, I cried. It was torrents because I mean, a lot of these women, on top of facing sexual abuse from an early age, on top of from like being ousted from their families, on top of really the thesis of the movie was how men have affected these women and how we break that cycle through therapy, through conversations as such that they were having. I mean, I cried. It was impactful, and to see the final product that they've then been around the world sharing the piece that they've done. I want to be part of more stories like that. That's what motivates me. That's what keeps me going, and that's why I say I need to be in a room and my voice matters, because I want to continue to uplift these stories.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so important. I would love to I'm curious, you mentioned, like, telling, like, first generation stories. I don't hear a lot of people talk about that. Like, I'd love to hear why you're passionate about that and why you think, those stories are important to be told.
Absolutely. I mean, so growing up, I did not know theater or any kind of media until I went to high school and I was introduced. I went to a Union City High School, and a theater teacher at the time, his name was Anthony Gusevich, went to New York and saw a show, and that was called Fuerza Bruta. That show was at the Darrell Roth Theater and was like an entire spectacle of people flying in the air. There was like a water like dance that happened on top of you through like a plexiglass. It was incredible. I went to go see it like four more times after that, as long as it was running. So I was introduced to the spectacle of theater in that capacity, but I didn't know the impact of what theater could be until I took a devised theater class, and we come to find out that what was on everybody's mind at that time and place was we were talking about bullying and how that affected other people, how that resonated with anyone, how bullying didn't just manifest itself from a person in the classroom, but it could also be your own bully, could be your family member. So I started to ask those large questions of how does everybody interact with these given circumstances in the world? The outcome of it is a diverse a unique experience for everyone that we can all relate to. And so that really opened my eyes of theater can be a healing process, and it could be a force to be start to ask the larger questions in life to bring us together. I've always been interested of focusing on our intersectionalities rather than what makes us different. And for me to come to circle back to the question of why we need to tell those first generation stories, I don't think we don't hear that enough of that. I mean, like I said, I didn't know theater. I wasn't introduced to a lot of media in that aspect. Being the oldest in the family of the siblings, I was kind of the person to like do all the like computer things. I would like handle the Wi-Fi. I would, quite frankly, I would read a lot of important documents that for like a 10-year-old, they shouldn't be answering things about like court. But because I knew like the most English in the house, that kind of like defaulted to me. And so my story isn't unique. There are so many. The high school that I went to was predominantly Latinx and Hispanic kids, where we again were all first generation. We all were children of immigrants, or if not, their families were here for one generation or two, and so like those struggles are rather beautiful. I don't see a lot of what those stories are, and I want to see what they develop again. And what I was just talking about, La Cachada, those market women, I see them here in my town, Union City. I know who those, market women are. I've seen them. Some of them are selling churros, some of them are selling, like, bubble wands in the summer, and we don't know what their experiences are, and I mean, that particular film explore that again, these women or rather have a backstory to them that is worth examining, and we can see ourselves in those stories too, and of what I know, at least of what I went to go see, and there was a lot of and it's not to say it's not of value, but I think of, like, when was starting to go to theater classes, I was reading a lot of the Greek theater, and I didn't know that I could find myself in Greek theater because it felt like it was someone else's story. It wasn't until recently where I saw Luis Alfaro's Mojada that I didn't know that the Chicano language could, or just a Spanish language could be in a Greek story, and it could be adapted into this method that talks about people coming crossing the border and their conflict of assimilating to the country and what they leave behind in our Spanish speaking countries. It's astounding to me, and that's those narratives are not told enough, and I want to see more of myself in that. And I know again, my story is not unique. My perspective on this isn't just mine. There are a lot of people, a lot of my friends. Again, the high school that I went to is predominantly Latino, Hispanic. A lot of the my class who then went on to do anything in the arts hold similar perspectives. Want to see more of ourselves in these stories, and that to me is why it's important to see. That was a really long-winded way to see to answer your question of it's important to see these first generation narratives because they are of others' experiences that we don't get to see in popular media.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree, and I think sometimes the American culture as a whole doesn't always, appreciate the richness of other cultures, right? Like, it's kinda
Mhm.
easy. to look down on people who have immigrated, and oh, their countries are poor, or their, you know, what, their government's corrupt, or whatever. But I
Hmm.
think there's such a richness that we miss out on by not hearing more of these stories.
I mean, I think people are attracted to like success stories and like rags to riches, and that's what's really enticing. But anything that's real, that deals with financial hardship, or the bigger questions of what I was dealing with Dreamhouse is assimilation versus and what is your stance on like cultures and values, and how do you assimilate versus retain your culture and keep the memory, the nostalgia. Where do you sit between that? And again, it was that was at Dreamhouse for Eliana's play, and was also the main topic on Derecho, with Estefania Fadul, of two sisters, two Latina sisters fighting on two different ideals, and how do they struggle with that in a house, and how do you raise your kids? Do you want them to be more American? What does being American even mean? Those questions are things that many people wrestle with, myself included, and I want to explore more of what that is, because it is, again, such a unique experience.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's important. Why do you think that you were attracted to sound out of all of the things that you can do in theater?
That's funny. I like I said, I was the like technical guru when I was younger, and so I would fix the router. Anything that would go wrong with the television, I would fix. And so I think just being that way, I didn't know that there was the technical aspect to theater. So once I started seeing it in that aspect, it became more problem solving, and I was like, oh, I can use this technology to make the art. And that has become my almost my philosophy in terms of how I approach things, of how can I use the equipment around me, how can I manipulate it to make the thing that I'm achieving for. So I think it just naturally lended itself. I will say I took a class with an old professor when I was at Montclair State University. His name is Scott O'Brien, and I took a class of his. First of all, this man, a very intense man, at first, and I, he was walking around the classroom giving the spiel for the first day, and I wrote Scott O'Neill in my journal, or in my paper, and then he, without like hesitation, like walked by me and like hovered over with his finger on where I wrote O'Neill, and he said, "It's O'Brien." And I was like, "Oh wow, this man is not playing around." But so he had such a confidence to him, that when he spoke about sound, I did not know that you can take people sonically to this place. I remember him saying, "I can take you to the beach in a snap. I take you to anywhere in the world by playing just a few sound effects. I can transport you there." And I think that appealed to me at that age, where I was like, I really wanted to make something, and I really let that be my medium. And I used QLab. If anybody's familiar with QLab, I like became a big QLab wizard, and it evolved from there to learning Ableton, and having to learn like the rest of these standard softwares that you would find in theater, just like music application, rather creation. And it transformed one into the other thing, and it was like I consider myself like a sound slash Foley artist. Really, when I introduce myself to anybody who's not a theater person, I'm like, I make sound for a living. I make noise for a living, and it's not to like demean what I do, but it's really the simplest way. I have creative conversations on what something should be like. Again, making the sound effect to our gargoyle. Who would imagine that I would be doing that? Um, but then on the flip side, I didn't know that it would also take me to places like I then worked on Kinky Boots, when in Germany, on a cruise ship. I did not know that I could do those things through sound. So it all started, one, from Scott O'Brien, from his class, from piquing my interest there. Earlier, from that, it was really just being a nerd, and of being the technology savvy person in the family.
What's maybe the weirdest thing that you've done to get the sound that you want?
Oh god, I think that question is always evolving between, like, asking my friends, like, to make weird noises. I think, I had to make a dinosaur hatch, and, a friend of mine was, like, chirping, and I was like, "Wait, can you do that one more time?" And, like, recorded him, and, along with, like, an egg hatching, it sounded like it was like, like, and it was an egg hatching. Between that, like, cutting up, like, heads of lettuce to make it sound like I'm breaking a skull, which is, like, such an old school technique. I there's almost nothing that I wouldn't do to go for the sound effect. I remember there was a show that I was doing called, Kill Floor, and it was about the kill floor of, like, for cows, for animals, and I it was a very disheartening dramaturgical research process because I had to yeah, sit through, some slaughterhouse videos. Um, so I was like, how am I gonna kill some cows? Fortunately, the Yellowstone Park has a huge database of cows and bison and other beautiful big animals that I got to like use and layer on top of saws to kill these animals. So again, there's nothing that I wouldn't do or for the sound effect. The joke the joke early on was I think I kept killing a larger and larger amount of people. It started with like I think my first sound design project was something like a school massacre to it was that, then we did Carrie, which, like, the whole town blows up,
Mhm.
and then I did the cow show where, like, I did killed an entire kill floor, like, so it just kept growing of, "Oh god, I'm the one who does the macabre shows. I'm the it's me," but I love it.
Yeah, so if anyone needs some, killing sound effects.
If anybody's looking to be murdered sonically, I'm your guy.
Yeah. If and or when you get stuck in the design process, how do you get unstuck?
Oh, this is a good question. I feel like I answer things in like anecdotes. There was a at the New Works Festival for the Longworth Theater, I was doing a show called The Merit System by Edwin Sanchez. Sometimes I read a script and I know exactly what's called for. I have things in my database if I don't already need to create something. But this one was what I call a memory play. When I call a memory play, I think of like there's always like a flashback. There's like a what I call a whoosh that transports us back to the flashback moment, and so on and so forth. This one, I thought I already had it figured out. I had my soundscapes, I was ready to go. So I'm playing things in the room, and the director, Tatiana, she goes, she's like, I love the swoosh. Can you make that more Latino? And I mean, if it were anyone else, I'd probably go like, "Well, what does Latino sound like?" But because I would probably be like a little bit more combative. But because it was her, I was like, "Okay, I know what she means. How do we dramaturgically infuse the culture into this?" And I was really stuck. I didn't. I was like, I can't do I can't play a whole musical number. I can't do like, what do I do?" So for me, I revert to the dramaturgy of it, and I think, okay, so this is about a story about somebody who's from Puerto Rico who is trying to assimilate into this American culture. What is inherently Puerto Rican? So I was listening to some music, and the music I was into some Celia Cruz, who is not Puerto Rican, but there was crossover in terms of a güiro. A güiro is an instrument that just makes like a little click clack noise. It's also used in Puerto Rico. So I think that is like with a few like slashes of that, with a few like of those sound effects, I think that'll transport us. So I recorded that, I reverbed it, I had like another cute little effect to it. I played it in the room, just like, and that works, and that was like a nice punctuating thing. So to answer your question, it takes some more dramaturgical research and having to like bang my head at the wall a little bit and really thinking like what other elements make up what is being asked for to make the sound moment. Whenever I get stuck, I try to think of it as a painting where I sit on it, I walk away, and I come back to it. Normally, when I come back to it, I come back with a fresher idea and more like impulses of like, let's try this out. and that normal has normally worked out for me.
Yeah, I don't know why that works, and that's something that's always kind of puzzled me. When I talk to designers, that's usually a question I'll ask them, how do you get unstuck? And a lot of times they'll say, when I walk away from it and come back. I don't know. Do you have any thought? Why does that work? Why when we walk away do we get clarity?
I think there's so much pressure on like I have to figure it out now. I need to make it work now. That I think it's like improv. I used to do improv when I was in college, and the biggest killer to that is when you start to think. When you start to think about it, you're not funny. You forget, you're not as natural. You don't Things don't come to you sporadically. So when you have the time to like walk away and take a breath and not think about it, you come with fresher ideas. And it's the same thing with like I said, with painting. Of when you walk away, you come and see the picture from a different perspective. You say, oh, I actually need to add more highlights, I need to add more shadows. There's not enough depth to this. You get to see it from a new light. When you're too, what like an acting teacher of mine would say, like in it, you can't do the thing. Does that even make sense? You can't, when you're too in it, you're not allowing yourself to really explore and have fun. And I think recently, I the my best ideas come from just having fun. The more silly and the more I just what I when I look back at things, or I'm like, I think this would be funny, or I think that this would just be like cause a laugh in the room, those end up being put in the final, like, product than, like, something that I work on days and days and days on, and it's not really the right impulse. I When you have more fun and you are less serious about what you're doing, I think you start to produce more authentic work. And to me, I think it ties in of like why the stories that I do is like I want to be as authentic to my own experience, and to whatever it is that I'm tackling on as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you also are an audio engineer, correct?
Yes, I have to be. I think at this point, I think if you do sound like, yes, it's like I thought about it very like, is binary the right word, or just like thinking of like one or the other, or rather think of it very black and white, where I had to either do the content and either do the creative thing, or solely do the creative things, or I could focus on the gear and how does it making it work and making sure that this all sounds right. But as I've evolved, I found that the two go hand in hand. They cannot. It's like the chicken and the egg kind of thing. They have to coexist in order to make a great product. But what makes you ask? Yes, that is a big way to saying I am an audio engineer.
Yeah. Yeah, audio engineers, in my opinion, and I am biased as a musician, but I think audio engineers are some of like the most probably like the least appreciated, least like the unsung heroes of the
Oh.
theater. And just like if you can't hear, I just that's so much of an experience is hearing. I've worked with some awful audio engineers and I've worked with some that just are magical, just absolutely magical. So I one of the questions I always wonder, and I'm always glad when I'm not an audio engineer, is when just like shit is hitting the ceiling and something's not
Oof.
working, or there's a terrible feedback sound and no one can figure out where it's coming from, or in the middle of the show, the main character's mic craps out. So
Yeah.
how do you like keep your cool when just everything is going wrong and it's a sound issue and it's your problem?
How do you keep your cool when everything is going wrong? Oh god. I think for me, it is about the problem solving aspect of it. And it's like, I think what takes precedence in my brain is how do I get this done? How do I solve it rather than freaking out? I kick into fight or flight mode because it has to get done. I mean, you know that the mic is off. The other people know that a mic is off. We're going to continue to pay that attention. We're going to continue to pay attention to that until it's fixed. So somebody needs to do it, and that somebody is me. And I've been in that situation. I mean, I remember being at Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish, and we were like first song in, and the SM says, and my monitor is out. I my Now she was on stage left in the wing calling, and my station was stage right. I ran from on in our little crossover. to with a little XLR cable. It swapped everything out just because the show has to go on. The second that I got that note, it's about you need to be on and go and fix it. Same thing as for being in A2, being in communication with the mixer and saying when the mixer says, "Oh, so and so is starting to get a little crackly." I'm there ready with my can of air. I wear overalls when I A2 because I think they should be the theater standard. I think anybody who is a backstage person needs to wear overalls. I mean, you first of all, you have so many pockets, and two, you don't have to worry about clothes if you just wear your one black overall, but that's different. Um, um, but I'm there with my kind of aerosol with my mic tape ready to go. I at any juncture you are like it's almost like the you have to stay ready so that you don't have to get ready and be prepared for any and all circumstances. So again, I think that's a long-winded way of say of fight or flight and get it done. There is no time to worry when people have paid their good money and they didn't pay their good money to see somebody with their crapped out microphone.
Yeah, I can't even count the number of times where there's a sound issue going wrong and I'm in the pit and I'm like, "Oh, I'm so glad this isn't my problem." I just keep on playing.
And in the pit too, it's like, oh, is somebody in the pit is sounding a little scratch. Can you check up on their microphone? Like it's the I mean, the prescription to that is being well prepared. If you do your checks in the beginning, you make sure that and you test everything through. You want to set yourself up for success, and then from there on, it's preparing for the worst. But I've had those situations too of like somebody, can you swap out somebody's mic, rather somebody's XLR in the pit? You're sounding crackly. They're sounding crunchy, and you have to go. And I've crawled so that the audience can't see me, and I'll be like, I'm like doing the most, being like a ninja to make these swaps. It happens.
Yeah, I think there's like just like the skills you need to be an audio engineer. Like, yeah, like getting around tight spaces without knocking things over and being able to like be invisible to the audience. There's kind of like
Hmm.
skills that maybe aren't really obvious that you'll need that you need.
I mean, I never knew like yeah, just between being a ninja about it all, like having to like I think I should have went and done something more secretive and been an assassin because the same skills apply. I have my little like utility belt of condensed air, mic tape, flashlight, also like a wrench, a Leatherman. In the event that anything happens, I have like my little pouch, and on top of this, like slithering through feet and, and unplugging things.
Yeah. As you have worked as a audio engineer and have worked with maybe people who are younger than you or who have just kind of started in the field, are there any kind of common mistakes that either you have made or you have seen younger people make as audio engineers?
That's so funny you asked that. I normally find myself to be the youngest person in any room that I enter in. So when you say younger, it's a unique. But I've made so many mistakes, and I'm glad that there have been other people in the room who, rather than make me feel bad about it, or correct me because it's for my own betterment. I think it comes back to the quote, like, "Is a friend is somebody who lets you know when your ass is out." So thus people just taking care of one another. I think it comes back to being prepared and not being afraid to ask questions. What I found in terms of just for myself is I have been in rooms where I don't know what's going on, or I've it's equipment that is out of my experience, and I'm not afraid to see who the smartest person in the room is and ask them for questions because I also need to know how this stuff works. If it's entrusted on me to be fixed, to be looked after and cared for, I need to know just as much as you do in order to execute this. And I think some people get scared about looking stupid and not having the answers that they don't want the proactivity isn't there. I would always ask questions. Who is the smartest person in the room in your department? Ask them the questions. If not, there's also lovely Google. But what I found, at least in theater is a teamwork effort. If you're not there to work with other people, you really shouldn't be doing it in the first place. So I found more often than not in those circumstances, people are willing to help you out. I remember being in shops, setting up audio rentals, not knowing a single thing what to do. I didn't even know like what to prepare when I first started out, and like just looking around and finding like somebody that I would be comfortable to asking a question like, what is this? And looking out for the like for the other person. I've been really blessed for people to be really sweet to me. I've built up my little Pelican case with my own equipment. I know like how to walk into a room, be prepared with my gear. Less of a like a direct approach. I would say to not be scared to ask questions if you really don't know something. To not be afraid to look stupid, because we've all been in that position. You have to be okay with growing. That's the only way that you do that. And have, I think what works best for to be an audio engineer is to be proactive and on at any juncture, because that is essentially your job. You have to be in the know of what's going on. Nothing can be of a surprise to you. And if it is, having the curiosity to explore, oh, okay, let's see if this, why is it making this noise, or how do we not make that happen? You have to be proactive in those kind of circumstances.
Especially when you're young. I think, I mean, youth, you can tell when someone's young, right? By their
Yeah.
physical feature. Like, I think more oftentimes than not, yeah, people are wanting you to ask questions and are open to that. Maybe more than when you're young you think they are.
And sometimes it just, I mean, it's not just asking questions, but asking the right questions and being honest. I have said sometimes like, listen, I don't know what's going on here, or I've said like, how do you do this thing? And I've been very on, or sometimes I use it to my advantage, where I'm so like, hey, I'm like fresh out of school. For the most part, people have been lenient with me about that, and they take not petty, but they're like, oh, okay, let me not be as much of a douche to you as possible. Um, which I happens, there are their divas, but being okay with those things, you like relinquish. I think what it is about the, like being is like you want to do things right because you don't want to mess things up, because you want to be called back, and it's fine. I mean, I've done things wrong all the time, and some. I remember one theater that will not be named that I like fresh out of school was mixing a musical of that, and I tried to speak up for myself, said like, "Hey, some of the equipment here, not going well," and I was essentially fired. No, I was fired
Oh.
because I wasn't mixing the shows to par of what they expected. But I also had the equipment against me. It was just me running a show of like what 16 people in the cast, and like also being my own A2. It was a lot, and I really wanted to do it right. I wanted to make it look like I knew what I was doing, and I think that's what I was essentially let go because there was a demand and I couldn't meet to that. And I look back at that now and I'm like, no, it was better that that happened. Yeah.
Hmm. So I live in Kansas City, so don't work in New York City. How does like freelancing and networking in such a huge city work? What have you learned about, building that network and supporting yourself in such a large market?
I would say for myself, have a lot of. I mean, growing up, I had a lot of proximity to New York City, and so traveling in and out is relatively easy based on like where I live. I mean, I get on a bus and I'm in there. Record time has been 11 minutes, or rather 7 minutes is record time. 11 is like close second, but it's really a quick commute. So I think proximity already put me in an advantage to say yes to taking up jobs. And when I say jobs, I mean of all experiences when it comes to like no money, sometimes paying me like pennies on end. I really got to say yes to a bunch of positions because I wanted to get a feel for it. And I mean, I was living at home with my abuela, and I was fortunate enough to be taken care of in that aspect. So I was able to, anything that I did make and as an income would go back into like me going into the city, me feeding for myself, and my small expenses. But as far as networking goes, I said yes to anything because I wanted my goal at that time out of school was I want to learn as much as I can. And I did. I said yes to nearly everything that came my way. I did outdoor theater. I in Brooklyn for the old Stonehouse. It was setting up a sound system every day for I want to say like 2 months. I've said yes to like designing shows that paid me pennies on end in like a shackle of a theater with like half a speaker, and it was just like me creatively problem solving. But I said yes to everything because I wanted to know what it was truly like. Now that's not really an option for most people because they have to pay the bills, and that's really unfortunate. When I think back on it, I'm like, did I really make the right decision on saying yes to those things? Because the next person who doesn't have the resources, they're going to need that money to go on. Can they pay people a living wage? And now I would say more than before, I'm more adamant about paying people a livable wage, almost aggressively. But beforehand, when I was just starting out, I would say yes to anything. Sometimes to my benefit, sometimes definitely not to my benefit. Um, but I think it was my yes and, which came from like improv, opened me up to meeting new people and and not being scared of introducing myself to a group of people, like taking reins of like what my department and sound is. How do I contribute to the larger picture on a production? How do I become proactive in a thing? How do I fix things? And being introduced to creative and like-minded people. I am really adamant of believing in the folks that you work with because you never it's the today we're in a show together, I'm making you up, tomorrow you're hiring me to be your designer on something, and that has been the case on some things. And I cherish the fruitful relationships that come out of that. That's not my intention when I go into my projects. I like to show up with my best intentions, show up with my full self, ready to actively participate, ready to be in the room, participating, problem solving, and offering my voice. And then from there, anybody who responds to that, I cherish that relationship. I think I got that from How to Steal Like an Artist. Share your work, and the right people will come. Found that through that, it has led me to the next project, and the next project has evolved from what I'm working currently on because then people know how I show up in the room and how I respond with others in the room. Personally, I think I'm a delight in the rehearsal room. And I like to like have those conversations of again the why are we doing this, the what's the larger questions, how do I show up, and being really interactive with my sound cues, and or if I'm working as an engineer, how do I become of service? What has worked in my success is how do I show up as a team player, which, as I said before, theater is teamwork. Theater is a big group project, and if you don't like doing group projects, again, you should not be doing it. If it's the biggest group effort, and you need to play it well with everyone. Sometimes some people don't play well, and you have to like bite your tongue and do it anyway. But theater is a group effort, and I want to make sure that I'm always doing my part for the bigger picture. Yeah, I want to say that the relationships that I've cultivated have been fruitful, and my experiences have led me on to be invited back to some institutions, and for me to like be suggested to other projects and so on and so forth. I'm a big believer of it's not just your work that you're selling on, it's your whole entity. And I think I want to credit that to Jorge Arroyo, who was my lighting professor, and also like my senior my senior seminar professor when I was graduating. It's not just what you do. You could be talented, but it's also about who you are. How do you show up? What am I getting in addition to what you do?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's almost like a separate art form in itself, right? Like on one hand, you have the creative, artistic art, and then on the other hand, you have this kind of like social networking, making friends, being kind. It's almost like
Yeah.
a completely separate art form in itself.
I mean, and it's also what you were saying of it's so easy for sound to be discredited. I mean, flashback to when sound was cut from the Tonys altogether. Um, but just some people just don't know what is it that I'm doing in the back of a theater on my computer because it just looks like I'm not doing anything. So like the biggest question when I was in undergrad was how do I like a lighting designer? I can't be like a lighting designer. I can't show my pictures of sound. That doesn't work that way. Um, how do I showcase what I do to a format that people will understand? And I took that personally. I decided to not only like make sure that I got the reels for the production that I was doing, and I was like going back and editing it so I can like layer my sound effects on top and share that on Instagram. But when I was in the room and I was talking about sound cues, I make sure to have the conversation with the actors and tell them like this is what this is doing. This is what I need you to be doing. So this is the effect of what's going to happen. Really inviting people to the process, and that's I find that anytime that I am the sound designer and do a more immersive experience, not show wise, but within the process with the actors, that they walk away knowing a little bit more of what it is that I'm doing, and that is always fruitful for me. That I'm sharing what I do, so it's more of just I make noise out in the corner, but this is an integral part to the process that it changes the entire scene to have underscore or a drone or an SFX to propel the story along. It changes the world of it, and I like it. I like being the monolith to that, and I think a lot of what drives me is I want to show that sound is just as important as lighting, as costume, as scenic. That it is a force to be reckoned with, and it'll change the complete scope of a production without it.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of ingredients that go into making a really good moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. So I like to ask everyone the same final question. What excites you right now? What are you looking forward to? What are you excited about?
What I'm excited about? Wow. I'm excited to be in the room back with people. We are like I think we're actually turning the corner on finally being vaccinated, or at least getting the majority of people being vaccinated and getting people in the rooms. I'm excited to see people buy tickets to Broadway shows. I'm excited for my friends to be employed. I'm excited for theater to come back. I'm excited for change to happen. I want it to change for the better in terms of people being compensated appropriately for shows being cast in being cast correctly, and not just given roles to ethnically ambiguous folk or anybody who is or being miscast. I'm excited to be back in the room. I really miss being in the room and having a sound system to play with. I miss mic check. I'm excited for that. I'm excited to start this journey. Personally, I've taken up a position in California, and I'm excited to travel across the country to start that position. It's a new challenge for me. I will be leaving everything that I know here in New York and in the town of Union City, and I'm excited to go to experience this new world that is Santa Maria, California, um, and involve myself in this institution. I'm excited for theater to be a proponent of healing and a cathartic experience again. I'm excited about that. It's going to be big. And I hope it's for the best that we've taken the lessons in this past year and we start to apply that to make theater equitable and better for everyone.
The music for the backstage creative was improvised and performed by Ian Leroy, and the logo was designed by Carly Wagner.